Hey everybody, I'm your host Double M, and on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down some recent fight announcements that have been, broken to the public in the last 24, 48 hours, maybe a little bit longer than that, but we have 4 fights we're going to be talking about. A couple of the fights, I believe, are for the December 2nd card, and then the dates of the other ones I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll put them on screen for you so you can see what date each of these fights are going to be taking place. One of them is going to be at UFC 296, which we already did a video on, and coincidentally, that's going to be the first fight that we're talking about. It's going to be in the bantamweight division between the former UFC bantamweight champion and the returning Cody No Love Garbrandt taking on Brian Boom Kelleher. I really think this is more of a get-right spot for Garbrandt at this current point in his career. He's coming off of that win at UFC 285 over Trevin Jones, and he looked like the Cody of old. He had good movement, good footwork, showcased his wrestling, his speed on the feet, but there were still some issues I saw in that fight when it came to Garbrandt's defense, and, kind of relying on his chin, which isn't the best idea since he's been finished or rocked so many times in his career. He won the fight, he looked good, but he did get clipped by Trevin Jones at certain points, and in that third round, it looked like he was kind of just holding on for dear life, but he was able to bank the first 2 rounds with his speed, his combinations, his footwork, and his wrestling. I think Garbrandt should be able to beat a guy like Kelleher. The one area I would give Kelleher an advantage in is probably durability along with his wrestling or a jiu-jitsu advantage. I think Garbrandt has the wrestling advantage in terms of, collegiate level wrestling, high school, college level wrestling, using the takedowns and using it to control top position, but, Garbrandt isn't the best on the mat. We've seen him be super successful from the top position in holding it and, landing ground and pound, but opponents usually can work their way back up to the feet. And with a guy like Kelleher who can go for front chokes, who can go for guillotines, who can go for submissions and work off of his back, I do think that Cody isn't in 100% safety, even if he does resort to his wrestling and get those takedowns. But I do believe he has a massive speed advantage over Kelleher on the feet, and he has a power advantage, in my opinion, paired with the speed, but we have seen Kelleher have big power in his left hook. His left hand is the moneymaker. He has a very good left hook, and he kind of leaps in with it, almost kind of Russian style, and we've seen him knock out guys like Hunter Azure with it inside the UFC. And then, like I said, he has that jiu-jitsu to fall back on, but I do believe this is a get-right spot for Cody Garbrandt. I do think that this is a fight where he can win this and move to a 2-fight win streak in the division. He has suffered a lot of losses lately in his career, losses to the likes of Rob Font. He lost to Pedro Munoz. He obviously lost the title to TJ Dillashaw and then lost the rematch to TJ Dillashaw and dropped down to flyweight and got knocked out by Kai Kara France, but I don't think that flyweight move was ever the best idea. I do favor Garbrandt to be the quicker, slicker fighter in this matchup. I think he can hit Kelleher when Kelleher can't hit him. He still has power, but I do worry about the durability, and I would worry about Cody's durability and chin against anybody in the division, whether it's inside the top 15 or outside of the top 15 when it comes to the bantamweight division. I think Trevin Jones was a step in the right direction to rebuild Garbrandt. I think this is another good, successful step, and I think he defeats Brian Kelleher. I'm going to say he wins by decision again. I'm not super confident that he will knock out Kelleher, but his speed and technical prowess and his boxing ability and putting his combinations together, I do think he has a chance to chin Kelleher. But I'll say he wins by decision, but I do like Garbrandt in this matchup, and I do think it's a good matchup for him. I just thought maybe he would have gotten somebody a little bit higher ranked in his next outing. And in continuing on the same card, we have a bout that I believe is going to take place on the prelims in the 145-pound featherweight division between Josh Emmett and Giga Chikadze. Emmett's coming off of that loss to Ilia Topuria in the main event of UFC Fight Night, where Topuria just pretty much dominated him from pillar to post, knocked him down a few times, and eventually ended up winning that fight via decision when I don't really think anybody expected that fight to go the distance. Giga Chikadze is coming off that decision victory over Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres. That was a fight where I actually backed Caceres because I just didn't have too much faith in Giga, but his range management, the control of the distance, the counter striking, the body kicks, it was all there. And to be honest, aside from a big overhand right or a left hook from Josh Emmett, who is quick, who is fast, who is very explosive, and has the knockout power, to catch Chikadze and hurt him, which, like I said, he's definitely capable of. I think this is going to be domination from Giga, and I think it's going to be very similar to the Yair Rodriguez fight. Like, obviously, he can close that distance and land that big overhand, change levels, jab to the body, come over the top with the overhand right, or walk into range, switch stance with the left cross like he did when he knocked out Shane Burgos or knocked down Shane Burgos. But I think the speed, range management, and just overall variety in the kicking game of Giga Chikadze is really going to butcher Josh Emmett. You know, in boxing range, it favors Emmett, and in kicking range, it favors Chikadze. So it's going to be really who can control the ranges most effectively that's going to be able to win the fight. Definitely, Emmett would probably be safe to rely on his wrestling, but we don't ever really see Emmett use his wrestling from an offensive perspective. More than likely, it's used to keep it on the feet, where he can use his lateral movement, his in and out stutter steps, and the little blitz shift combinations to catch his opponents on the chin and try to knock him out, but we don't really see Emmett use the wrestling offensively. We saw Kelvin Kattar, who we never see use the wrestling, be able to take down Giga and control him, and I thought that the wrestling and grappling of Caceres was going to give Chikadze some trouble and lead to an eventual submission victory, but it was pretty much a striking matchup for the entirety of the bout. And with this fight staying on the feet, I think the body's going to be open for that left kick of Giga Chikadze. Now, obviously, Emmett can time it, try to step in as he throws that body kick and come over the top when Giga's exposed with that big overhand right if they're going to be in opposite stances. If he throws it as a switch kick, it's not going to be as readily available, but if he is in that southpaw stance, you know, the overhand right's going to be there for Emmett, the left hook if he misses the overhand right. But I think the speed and power of the kicking game of Giga Chikadze is just going to eat up the legs and body of Emmett. I think it's going to be very similar to the Yair Rodriguez fight. I think that left body kick's going to hurt Emmett early and often. He's going to control the range, throw teep kicks, little front snap kicks to the breadbasket, throw kicks to the inside leg like we saw Jonathan Martinez use against Adrian Yanez, and then eventually just rip that body apart with that left kick. I think the left kick of Giga from the southpaw stance is going to drop Emmett and get I'll say a second round TKO in this fight for Giga Chikadze. It's a great matchup. It is competitive because Emmett has the equalizer in his boxing and the power in that overhand and the left hook, but I do think the kicking is just going to be too much, and I think he crumbles Emmett with a body shot and knocks him out in the second round. So my early pick for this fight is Giga Chikadze second round liver kick TKO. All right, this next fight is going to be a little bit off on the dates because we talked about UFC 296 first. This is going to be UFC Fight Night Austin's alleged main event for December 2nd, and it's going to be a banger in the lightweight division with the man who's coming off a first-round knockout in 37 seconds over a man who was undefeated in the UFC in Grant Dawson, and Bobby King Green, who's coming off, I believe this is now a 2-fight win streak with wins over Tony Ferguson via submission, and then this win via knockout in round 1 over Grant KGD Dawson. And he's going to be taking on the man coming off of a career resurgence type of victory over Jalen the Tarantula Turner back at, I believe it was also UFC 285, which we talked about earlier, in Dan the Hangman Hooker. Dan Hooker versus Bobby Green in a 5-round main event in the lightweight division is a banger of a matchup. You have kicker versus boxer. You know, usually striker versus grappler. Here you have kickboxer and Muay Thai specialist versus, you know, old school Philly shell implementing style of boxing with Bobby Green. I do think that the speed of Bobby Green is going to give Dan Hooker a lot of trouble. Jalen Turner's long, tall, rangy. That's not really what you're going to be looking for with Dan Hooker. At least for Bobby Green in a matchup for Dan Hooker, you're not going to be looking at a guy who's going to have the length and reach advantage. That's going to go to Dan Hooker, and he's going to want to keep it long. He's going to want to keep him at the edge of his jab, keep him right at kicking range, throw those front kicks to the body, throw calf kicks, attack the legs, attack the body, and then go upstairs with head kicks. But the kicking game of Dan Hooker and the knees right up the middle are going to be his best options. He's going to want to look to pressure Bobby Green, close off that distance and range kind of like a Drew Dober, and then try to get into the clinch with elbows, land knees up the middle, try to get him to change levels, feint some level changes, and get him to lower his level so that Hooker can come up the middle with that knee, which we've seen him knock out multiple people with in his UFC career. But I do think the speed advantage and just the overall technical advantage on the feet when it comes to the boxing, I think Bobby Green's going to be too fast for Hooker in this matchup. Now, if it stays at a kicking range, I would definitely give the advantage to Hooker, but we've seen Bobby Green throw some kicks before. He uses a very good front little stabbing teep kick to the bread basket. It's like a little front snap kick to the body that he uses very well. But the bread and butter is in that 1-2. The 1-2, the check hook. He uses the check hook and the 1-2 down the middle extremely well. And the straight left is what caught Grant Dawson and knocked him out. And you're going southpaw versus orthodox here. So it's going to be that outside foot positioning battle where Hooker's going to want to keep that lead left foot on the outside of the lead right foot of Bobby Green and throw front kicks up the middle, throw the inside low kick against the opposite stance, throw that round kick to the body. Look to use some head kicks and use that jab to poke and prod, keeping Bobby Green at that kicking range. Bobby Green's going to want to close off that distance, snipe that little straight left down the middle as he gets the outside foot, almost exactly how he got that knockout win over Grant Dawson. I think this is a very, very tough matchup. I think the later rounds would probably favor Dan Hooker. I think if it goes into the 4th and the 5th, I might give Hooker the advantage in being able to push the pace, because if it gets that far, he's probably been able to mix up his wrestling, mix up his elbows, his knees, and just working inside the clinch and then using the kicks to his advantage. But I think Bobby Green's going to be too fast for Dan Hooker. I really do. I think the speed of the combinations, I think it's going to look similar to the Drew Dober fight. Hooker's a dog. Hooker's going to make it dirty. He doesn't mind getting into a dirty fight, but the speed, and now we've seen power and, technical ability of Green in the boxing with that Philly shell, shoulder rolling, catching a lot of the shots. I think Dan Hooker's just not going to be able to get out of the way. And unless he can make it dirty and close off that distance and get him up against the fence where he can land those knees, elbows, uppercuts, and just dirty box with Bobby Green and probably have an advantage, especially with his knees, I think it's going to be very hard for Hooker to keep it at that kicking distance without Bobby Green being able to close off that range and crack him on the chin. I'm actually going to go with Bobby Green to get a finish here. Another finish. I know he's not known for getting finishes, but I think he can crack Hooker enough times and hurt him enough times to eventually just get a TKO. So I'm going to go with Bobby King Green as an early prediction for this matchup to defeat Dan Hooker via a late 3rd round TKO. And the last fight we're going to talk about today is what's going to be the alleged co-main event for UFC Austin, and again in the lightweight division, between Beneil Dariush and Arman Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan versus Dariush is a fight that I've called for and campaigned for a little while now at this point, and I think both fighters are extremely evenly matched. I think this is basically a coin flip of a fight. It's about as 50-50 as you can get. I would favor the durability and longevity of Arman Tsarukyan at this point because he hasn't taken as much damage. He hasn't been knocked out in his UFC career. We've seen Beneil Dariush get finished. We've seen him get knocked out multiple times. We just saw him get knocked out by Charles Oliveira, which is what earned him this what was going to be a UFC title rematch against Islam Makhachev this weekend, but now it's Alexander Volkanovski stepping in. But I think Beneil and Tsarukyan is going to be extremely competitive. I really want to see who's going to get the advantage when it comes to the wrestling. I would give the striking advantage and the striking power to Beneil Dariush. I do think he hits harder than Tsarukyan. I think he doesn't mind getting into a brawl, but I just think Tsarukyan is going to be more durable. So if they get into exchanges, I could easily see Beneil winning in the striking distances, whether it's boxing or the kickboxing, because I think he is the better overall striker, but I just worry about his chin, his durability, and the fact that he has been dropped and knocked out multiple times. Now, the grappling is going to be where this fight's going to get interesting because Beneil Dariush was able to defeat Mateusz Gamrot. He rocked him with a big overhand left and dropped him. He was able to out-grapple and out-position Mateusz in certain aspects. And the way that Gamrot was able to beat Tsarukyan, albeit, controversially, because a lot of people think Tsarukyan beat Gamrot in that UFC Fight Night main event, was because he was able to push the pace, was because he was able to get those takedowns. He was able to slow down Tsarukyan, and he was able to make it competitive enough on the feet to where Tsarukyan couldn't have extreme confidence to just crash the pocket recklessly. But even in that fight with Rafael Fiziev and Mateusz Gamrot, we saw that Gamrot's ability to use the jab and ability to use the 1-2 and the straight right hand down the middle was very, very effective against one of the best strikers in the division in Rafael Fiziev, obviously before the injury. But I think this fight is very close, and it's very difficult to make a pick because, like I said, I think the power and the technical advantage on the feet goes to Beneil. I think the speed on the feet with the striking combinations probably goes to Arman. I think the defensive ability on the feet is pretty close because neither of these guys are that good when it comes to striking defense on the feet. But Arman's younger. He hasn't taken as much damage. He hasn't been in as many wars. He hasn't been finished. And in the grappling, I mean, we saw him hang with Gamrot. If he can hang with Gamrot, he more than likely can hang with Arman Tsarukyan. And we did see Arman Tsarukyan get cracked by Joaquim Silva on short notice and get dropped. And looked like he was going to get finished in that fight. And then he came back and eventually finished off Joaquim Silva. But this is a very, very close matchup, and whether you're picking Beneil or picking Tsarukyan, I wouldn't be mad at either pick or either side that you're on, because I can see clear advantages for both guys, and I could really see either one winning. If I have to make a pick, I think I'm going to side with Beneil. I just feel like he is more dangerous overall in MMA than Tsarukyan. But then again, the longevity, the young, the youth advantage on the side of Tsarukyan, I think it's very close, but I think I gotta edge Beneil out. I just think he might have a little bit more of that dog in him over 5. It's going to be a 3-rounder, not a 5-rounder. But yeah, I think I gotta side with Beneil. I feel like he's gonna get it done. It's probably by decision, but I think he can hang in the grappling, he can hang in the scrambles, he can hang in the exchanges. Like I said, if he can hang with Gamrot, we know he can hang with Arman, and he's more dangerous on the feet. You just gotta worry about him getting clipped with a big shot on the chin and getting knocked out. But I'm gonna edge out Beneil Dariush as an early prediction to win this co-main event via decision. So yeah, early on, like I said, pretty much a coin flip of a fight. But give me Beneil Dariush via decision over Arman Tsarukyan.